Okay, here's what I've done. I simply closed out of the low-res robot, the low-res cartoon robot. I still have, obviously, the high-res robot open here inside Photoshop. And as I mentioned previously, I want to introduce you now to a dialog box inside Photoshop that's going to allow us to resize images. You may have stumbled upon this dialog box on your own if you've been messing around a little bit with Photoshop. He's called the Image Size dialog box, and he's found underneath the Image menu. So head up to the Image menu up at the top, and then there you will find Image Size. Now, here's a keyboard shortcut that you may want to commit to the sticky note that you have hanging off the bottom of your monitor. And that is, on the Mac side here, Command-Option-I, or on the Windows side, Control-Alt-I. And the reason why I suggest that you memorize or try and remember this keyboard shortcut is this is one of these dialog boxes inside Photoshop that you'll find yourself coming into a lot. Let's go ahead and head into the dialog box there. So again, image size. Here we are. Before I really get tearing into this dialog box, I want to say this, that if you were to email me an image, if you were to email me a photo or a graphic or something, the first thing that I do is I get the file open inside Photoshop and I hit Command-Option-I or Control-Alt-I on the Windows side to get into this dialog box, because I want to know what I'm dealing with right off the bat. I want to know what resolution I have inside this image. I want to know the dimensions, both the print dimensions and the pixel dimensions, and so on, right? I want to know what I'm dealing with, right? So bear that in mind as you're working along inside Photoshop. As for this dialog box, I think probably what would be in good order is to give you a tour of this dialog box first, and then we'll kind of dig further into things here. Now, what I want you to make sure of before we sort of commence our tour is that resample image down at the bottom is turned on. So if you don't have a check mark there, I didn't have a check mark beside mine, make sure you do. And your dialog box kind of springs to life after you turn that guy on. So let's begin our tour of the image size dialog box. There's a lot in here, obviously. At the top of the dialog box, we have the pixel dimensions for our image. And again, you may recall from the previous exercise, we have 1500 pixels in width and 1500 pixels in height. So these are the number of pixels or the dimensions of our document, of our image as measured in pixels. Below that, we have the document size. Sometimes I think of this as the physical size or the print size of our document. If I were to go and print this image off on my printer, it would come out at these dimensions, 5 inches by 5 inches. And then below that, we have the resolution of our image as well, 300 pixels per inch, right? And then below that, we have some check boxes and we have a drop-down menu down at the very bottom. We'll get to all this stuff. It gets a little bit more involved here. But at this stage of the game, I think what I want to make sure you understand is if you are working on an image that is destined for your website or perhaps your blog or something like this, in other words, an image that's related to web design, you don't really care that it's going to print off 5 inches by 5 inches because you're never going to print it off. It's only going to appear on screen. So if you're working on an image that's destined for the web, or it's going to be incorporated into a web design interface of some sort, you'd be more concerned or really only interested in the pixel dimensions. So in other words, I'd come in here and I would set up the width and height of my image so that it fits inside my web layout. Maybe it's going to be a web banner or something like this, right? If you instead are working on a brochure or a layout, maybe in Adobe InDesign, you don't really care so much about the pixel dimensions. You don't really care how large this guy shows up on screen. What you care about is the physical dimensions or the print dimensions, right? You want to make sure that this image is going to fit inside your postcard or your brochure or your flyer or whatever the case is, right? Now, if you are someone like me, I flip between the two worlds. I flip between the world of web design and Dreamweaver and WordPress and blogging and the world of print design and Adobe InDesign and Adobe Illustrator and all this good stuff. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll flip between the two areas inside this dialog box depending on the task at hand. So I hope that's all good. There's still more that I want to show you inside this dialog box, and I think what I'll do is I will go further with you inside this dialog box in the next video.